It looks like all our commissioners here, so we'll be starting momentarily. All right, it's 7 o'clock on our regular Thursday meeting. I'd like to call this meeting of the Transportation Commission to order. And Mr. Freed, would you take a roll call?
My pleasure. Commissioner Del Rosario.
Present.
Commissioner Graham.
Here.
Commissioner Javendel.
Present.
Vice Chair Fong.
Present.
And Chair McCroskey.
Present. Thank you. Moving right along, I'd like to open up public comment. I will say that this is the opportunity for public attendees to make comments on items that are not otherwise on the agenda. The exception to that is the future agenda item for which we don't take public comment. So if you have a suggestion for a future agenda item, pardon me, this would be the time to bring that up as well. And we generally allow 3 minutes for each public comment. Mr. Bond.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So if any attendees wish to speak at this point, please use the raise your hand function. At the moment, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Yeah, so not seeing any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Fair enough. Then let's move on to the next item. That would be the under presentations, our monthly police data on collisions and citations.
Thank you, Chair. So reporting this month for the month of February, there were 2 reported vehicle pedestrian collisions, 0 reported bike collisions, 10 vehicle collisions, with 1 of those being an injury collision. 7 moving citations were issued and 0 DUI arrests were made. That concludes my presentation.
Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Del Rosario.
Thanks. For staff, do you have any details on the vehicle pedestrian collisions?
I do not.
It'd be great if we can maybe get those for the next month and see if there's anything that can be done to remedy.
I'll request that.
Other commissioner questions? Seeing none, let's see if we have any public comment on this item.
Again, if anyone would like to address the commission on this, please use the raise your hand function. At the moment, I'm not seeing anyone. Yes, Chair, I'm not seeing anyone raise their hands.
Okay, just giving it a moment. Great, let's bring it back to the commission. Any comments, observations, further discussion? Not seeing any. I will thank staff for this report and move us along to the shared mobility report.
Thank you, Chair. This is now bi-monthly, so this is reporting on the months of January and February. And Gig Car Share reported active members of 195 and 199 for those months, with trip starts of 450 and 456. So bounced back from December, but still definitely at lower levels That concludes that presentation.
Great. Any commissioner questions? Seeing none, let's check and see if there's any public comment. Members of the public, if you want to use the raise your hand function.
I'm not seeing anything, Mr. Chair.
Bring it back to the commission for any comments or observations. Seeing none, I think we'll move along to our consent calendar. And the only item on our consent calendar are the minutes of our February 25th meeting. Are there any comments on the meeting minutes from the commission? Any corrections or clarifications? Seeing none, let's call it to the public. If you have a comment again, use the raise your hand function. Not seeing any, let's bring it back to the commission. I guess I'm looking for any comments, or we can move right to a motion.
I'd be happy to move approval of the minutes and the consent calendar.
So moved by Jean Vidal. Can we get a second?
Second.
Graham seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? Are we doing this by roll call?
Yes.
Please do so.
Commissioner Del Rosario,
Yes.
Commissioner Graham,
Yes.
Commissioner Jamando,
Aye.
Vice Chair Fong,
Yes.
Commissioner McCroskey.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. The minutes are adopted, and that clears out our consent calendar. And we'll be moving right along to item number 5, discussion of possible action on the following matters. And let's start with the sugar sweetened beverage tax. The staff want to introduce this?
Yes. So this is an action item. I'll give you brief background and then hand it over. This is based on a 2016 voter approved ordinance that established tax of 1 cent per fluid ounce on distributing sugar sweetened beverages. It is general fund revenue, and the aim of the ordinance was to apply these funds towards specific purposes related to health and well-being. Estimated $250,000 in tax proceeds for the fiscal year 2022. Prior projects have funded installation of water bottle filling stations, school crossing guard program, health and fitness classes provided by Recreation and Community Services Department, safe routes to school programs for elementary and middle school students, and Healthy Me music and movement programs for elementary students. The process is annual solicitation of recommendations from various entities, including the Transportation Commission, and an annual City Council study session in conjunction with the city's budget process. Last year, the Commission's recommendation included the school crossing guard program, safe routes to school bike safety program, some projects including curb extension at Talbot and Marin in conjunction with the installation of a flashing beacon there, additional flashing beacon east of Peralta for crossing Marin, and additional bicycle parking at Albany High School. And with that, the staff is seeking a recommendation to City Council for the use of the sugar sweetened beverage tax proceeds for fiscal year 2022.
Great. I have a question. Can you tell me if these proceeds have been trending up or down over time? I guess there's some assumption that if the tax affects consumption, that the proceeds might be going down over time.
I can try to pull up the report from last year. I don't remember it being a higher budget in the previous year. So I don't think I've seen it trending down, but I'll
So
see.
it's fairly stable.
I believe so.
Okay, great. Other commission questions? So we're sorry.
Thanks. The school crossing guard program, does the budget for that or the need for that change with any of the school changes? Particularly, you know, Marin's going to be shutting down or Ocean View reopening. So does that change the budget need or the staffing need for the crossing guard program?
I'd have to defer to the police department that's managing that program. My recollection from when Ocean View closed was we kept within the same program that we had allocated number of crossing guards and just made a decision on where those should be located with the change. So that's how we dealt with the first school closure.
Can I get a follow-up question with that? Are they all employed still, given the pandemic? So I do remember that discussion now because we didn't want to terminate anyone's job. So we kept them on and we had other uses for them. Are they all still employed right now?
I saw one out recently, so I think they've at least been brought back in some capacity with the changes in school schedule, but I'd have to check on where the staffing is at this point.
If I can add to that, Commissioner Del Rosario, several years ago, we switched from using city employees to using a contract service. So the people that you see out there today are not city employees. And I believe some accommodation was made for them, but I don't know the details about what that accommodation was during the pandemic when the schools were closed.
Thanks.
If I can respond as well, I don't know the current situation, but I did get involved a little bit in discussions with the school district and the chief of police at the time talking about the Ocean View relocation. And the thought was that the need was still there, that just the location shifted. And so the personnel were shifted appropriately to respond to that. And I expect the same to be pretty much true with the two Marin Elementary crossing guard positions.
Thanks.
Other commission questions? Commissioner Grant. You're muted.
Thank you. So from the recommendations that we put forward last year, what of them were implemented? Because some of them are operating and some are capital. And so I think it would, I don't have enough awareness to know what has been done from this list versus what would be a holdover.
So from the list, the school crossing guard program and the Safe Routes to School program were included in the council budget. The curb extension at Talbot and Marin was not funded as a separate project, but it is being looked at for inclusion with the Marin repaving project. So you'll should expect a presentation next month on that project, but that's how we're looking at delivering that priority rather than as a standalone project. We're also looking at where additional flashing beacon installations might be cited, consistent with the recommendation number 4 with the Marin repaving project. And funding for bicycle parking at Albany High School was not included in the council budget.
Okay, thank you. I guess actually for future reference, it would be helpful to have a reporting of not only what this commission recommended, but then what was adopted. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Other commissioner questions? All right, let's open it up to public comment. Members of the public, please feel free to use the raise your hand function.
Chairman Kresge, I'm not seeing anyone raise their hand.
All right. Well, having no public comment, we'll bring it back to the commission, and let's get suggestions for continuing our new items. Who would like to start off? Mr. Fong.
Yeah, I have a few ideas. I'm really interested in ways that we could be improving San Pablo, especially since we're doing that redevelopment plan on San Pablo. How can we have, develop a bike lane there, maybe better crosswalks across San Pablo, different way, maybe, eventually if there is some sort of, bus rapid transit, how we can integrate with that sort of thing, I'm very excited about. So I think that's one thing that I would propose, how we can improve that, and maybe even, improving sidewalks, widening sidewalks in San Pablo. That's one thing I would be interested in. Another idea I'd like to suggest is also, expanding pedestrian and bike access to Albany Bulb. I think it seems a little bit difficult to get there by bike or pedestrians. That's another something I'd be curious to explore. And then finally, yeah, just around Marin Avenue, same thing as, I don't know if we can, improve some crosswalks there and make it a little bit safer. Those are a few ideas that I have. I don't know if that's outside of the scope of how we can use these funds, but those would be places that I'd be curious to apply some of these funds.
What was that last one? I missed the
Oh, just crosswalks around Marin. Yeah,
Marin.
across
Marin School or Marin Avenue?
Marin Avenue.
So some of those things do strike me as a little bit out of the scope of this sort of funding stream. We tend to look for projects that will directly affect youth and primarily support youth and health and wellness. Not that anything you named wouldn't, but they're just not specifically for that. And in the past, we haven't done a lot of recommending projects that are new or outside of the scope of what's already being done, unless they're fairly low cost.
Got it. Okay, so maybe if we're focusing on schools and maybe crosswalks, maybe across from Motion View Elementary, or that are crossing these major arteries that kids would need to cross. That could be maybe a little bit more apropos. And I think with the Albany Bulb suggestion, that is promoting active lifestyle. So I think that could fall into that category as well, helping kids and families get to green spaces in Albany.
Could you be a little more specific about the Albany Bulb idea?
Yeah, just I don't know, just getting across the freeway. I don't know if there's a way to make it a little bit just more accessible. It just is a little bit circuitous, and if we can just make it a little bit nicer, that's a suggestion there.
I would also suggest that getting both the commissioners and the city council to buy into an idea, the more concrete it is probably going to be more successful. While building a bike bridge over I-80 at Buchanan would be lovely. It's a little out of the scope of this particular funding stream.
That's fair. Yeah. That's good feedback. But I just want to throw that out there, and I wasn't sure how concrete we needed to have these things, but I'm just throwing out some ideas at this point.
Yeah. Fair enough. Thanks for your ideas. And don't turn off your stream of ideas, but let's get some other ideas and when we'll come back. Commissioner Graham.
Well, I think to the point of the conversation you just had, I think in the future, I would rather have staff bring a report with suggestions, because to me, these should be like ongoing operating costs that need to be re-upped annually, like the crossing guard program, or it should be sort of the next thing on the active transportation plan. So I have no real comment personally, because I feel like I don't have enough background in terms of a knowledge of all that's needed for the city. So my recommendation I would like to have a staff recommendation in the future, or a few staff recommendations to choose from. I'm done.
Okay. Wow, are anybody else's Zoom windows reorganizing themselves spontaneously? This is new for me. If I look a little cross-eyed, you'll understand why. Other commissioner suggestions? Del Rosario. You're still muted.
So to Commissioner Graham's point, the programmatic ideas from last year that need to continue to be funding, I think we're bringing those forward. So the crossing guard program and the safe routes to school program, we should continue those. But it would be, we've definitely talked about a lot of projects in the past year, and I wonder which ones need funding that also fit within the pretty tight dollar amount, which I know we considered last year. So I don't know how much money is left and what's at the top of the list, but the two program ones we should definitely advance, in my opinion.
Mr. Jean-Abel.
Just want to chime in that I agree with continuing the programs, the school crossing guards and safe routes to school efforts. Yeah, and if there are other things, again, from active transportation program, or that can enhance ability for people walking and biking to school, I would certainly be in favor of those. Yeah.
Great. I'm going to take a moment here to flip back to the list. So the list from last year was school crossing guard program, safe routes to school bike safety program, curb extension at the southwest corner of Talbot and Marin Avenue to coordinate with the planned flashing beacon that is now installed. And then we recommended a rectangular rapid flashing beacon at Marin east of Peralta. Mr. Freed, you mentioned that the curb extension bulb out is being looked at as part of the Marin paving program. Does that mean that it would be funded as part of that, or is it still needs funding?
Cost estimate of that project is to be determined. We're still in early design.
Understood.
Doesn't, I don't think, have general fund allocation currently programmed for it, which is what this discussion is about. It's, I believe, relying on Measure B, BB, and paving SB1 funds in the CIP for that. Part of the challenge, I think, as we brought in some capital projects in the last year's discussion, is we do have a separate process for capital budgeting, and how exactly sort of the timing of this fiscal year general fund discussion would tie into that is a little bit tricky. There have been a couple, so we could, yeah, I think the commission could recommend general fund dollars supplement a project that is in this time window. So we're in paving, Loney intersections. If there are budget shortfalls for those projects, I guess that would match up timing wise, but it's difficult, I think, to put a new capital project unless it's small enough in scale that, but independent of the capital improvement planning, it's a little challenging. The other element I was going to note, so there is potential, I think, on the sort of study or conceptual side to tee up some new priorities if there are new ideas. So you mentioned bulb access. There has been improvements recently on the adjacent to the bulb with the new path, and so there is some need for better marking or even improvements to the connections between the new segment and the existing path. There's also been there's a new parking lot and turnaround, so there's some considerations with that, as well as the current use nearby with the vaccination. So there are some issues that city staff has identified that could use some planning to improve the access to the bulb there, that could merit taking a closer look. but maybe would be as a study or sort of planning kind of recommendation versus a capital.
Commissioner Jonathan.
I'm curious, I don't recall if bike racks for the high school were added or funded, and in particular with the high school temporarily hosting Ocean View students and then in the future Marin School students. It seems like the demand for bike rack space there is at least temporarily increased. And if that hasn't, been served in some way, that may be, again, something to recommend once more. Again, depends on whether there's space there. I also like the idea of improving the signage or markings or guidance, whatever, at the bulb where the Bay Trail comes through. The new section connects to the old section. It's a little bit ambiguous. Certainly worth improving there.
I think I can respond about the high school racks. At the time, I guess around the beginning of 2020, the school district moved a fair number of bike racks into the courtyard area between the new school buildings and the old school buildings at the high school. Unfortunately, they're somewhat antiquated racks. But my judgment is that because racks exist until we have a more regular attendance during good weather, which we really didn't get to last year, that it's not particularly politic or appropriate to push for new or additional bike racks at the high school. That's my own observation. You may differ. Well, I've heard support specifically for the first two items. So the programs of Safer School and the traffic guards, not so in that order. I'm sorry, Mr. Freed, I didn't quite know how to interpret your answer on the third item about funding and the paving program versus the bulb out, and whether it would be appropriate to ask for money for that or if it's needed. I think you were a little broader in your answer, and maybe you could be a little more specific.
The delivery of that project should fit in this fiscal year. So I don't see a problem with the commission recommending council allocate to it. I don't know if there's a need or if it complicates it on the programming side. I think it at least lines up in the delivery timing with this year when staff would hope to deliver that. There is separate funding programmed. I'm not the one that does the CIP programming, so I don't know if I can speak to any other issues that would be raised with adding this as a funding source to it. I don't think adding local general fund dollars would complicate it in any way.
Okay. Well, I, for one, would be interested in reiterating that request, number 3, to try and make sure that gets at least carried forward and implemented. Commissioner Graham.
So do we need a motion, or are we taking an action? So I would suggest that I would make the motion to that we fund the first 2 operation items on here, and then we ask the staff come back with sort of the delta of funds left and a recommendation for for additional funding opportunities. either operational or capital.
That would make a lot of sense if we were the only ones allocating the funds. The way this allocation works is that different commissions and committees make recommendations to the city council, and the city council decides from those recommendations what funds to allocate to what projects. So
Well, what is the timeline for that? Because I guess I think my interpretation of this conversation is that there's going to be consensus amongst us that the first two items we would recommend as a group. I'm not comfortable recommending anything else without sort of either a staff report or going back and looking at the CIP myself. So I guess then I'll turn that over to Jeff or Justin in terms of what it is that you exactly need from us. Or Commissioner Javandal.
No, I was just going to ask that question as far as, do we have time to wait until our next meeting to make the recommendation to council with some staff input? If so, I will second the motion. Otherwise, I think we need to find some more things to add right now.
Justin, I don't know. I'm not aware exactly what the schedule is for the soda tax discussion. I know the council won't make a final decision on the overall budget until usually late June, and they usually hold a study session in early June. So, Justin, unless you have other information, I think you've got a month if you want us to come back with more information.
I think they said April or May for the study session, but I don't think I've seen it on the schedule yet.
In that case, I would like to second it, and if I can make an amendment of adding Justin's suggestion of improved guidance for the connection at the Bay Trail and the bulb. That way, if we don't have time to come back in April, we'll at least have something capital to go along with the programs.
Commissioner Graham, is that acceptable?
Sure thing.
Any other discussion? Can we do a hand vote on this, or do we need a roll call on the motion?
Just to be clear, then you're recommending the 2 programs and the additional bulb connections. And if we can bring back, you're not recommending those.
I think the bulb, sorry, Commissioner Javandal, why don't you clarify?
Well, our first preference is to have staff come back in April with a recommendation for some additional capital projects or programs if any come up. And if not, then the bulb connections become our capital recommendation if you have to submit it before then.
And I mean, sorry, never mind.
No, please.
Well, I don't know the motion, if I'm allowed to add on to that. I would like the potential capital to fit the potential budget, right? So I think that's the connection. Like, we want to know the delta of what we're talking about and what we essentially can get for that. Or, if it's like a new project or if it's making the margins for another project or something to that effect. But I think the motion still stands, the revised motion, I think.
So in effect, this is kind of a contingency measure in the event that this moves more quickly than we think it will. Okay, that's fine.
So yeah, so I think that sounds like the idea is, if we don't have time, if they think about this, evaluate this before we have time to meet again, we have these 3 recommendations. I understand what the motion is saying.
All right. Were you asking me for a call when I wanted to make sure I...
No, that's fine.
Commissioner Del Rosario?
Aye.
Commissioner Graham,
Yes.
Commissioner Fong, or Commissioner Jamindal, sorry,
Aye.
Vice Chair Fong,
Aye.
and Chair McCroskey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Great. Motion carries. And that'll close us out on that item. And we'll move along to item 5.2, the Bird shared electric scooter presentation.
Thank you. So I will briefly introduce this, and we have a presentation. Bob Walsh, I'll work on adding him in. Under current city regulations, motorized scooters are generally defined and regulated the same as other motor vehicles. In the city's open space regulations, they are called out more specifically and may not be operated in the Albany Hill open space area nor in the waterfront area. A scooter share business operating in Albany is otherwise just required to obtain a business license to operate. Other shared mobility companies have also provided the city with proof of liability and with usage data consistent with permit requirements typical in other jurisdictions. City staff met with representatives of Bird in February to discuss their interest in deployment in the city of Albany. Staff encouraged them to reach out to local community groups and to present to the Transportation Commission, and so they're here today. And with that, I'll introduce Bob Walsh, who's Senior Manager for Government Partnerships with Bird. He has a presentation.
All right. Thank you, Justin. And thank you, commissioners, for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Bob Walsh. I am the Senior Manager for Government Partnerships in Northern California for Bird Shared Scooters. And I do have a presentation. I know something you guys are so happy to hear. I'm going to share with you. And hopefully you can see the presentation up there. Hello, Albany. And really, my thought here was just to update you on the shared scooter programs and just really express our interest in exploring opportunities to perhaps operate in Albany. We are really looking at the area as sort of a metro area. We're talking to other cities in the area. Emeryville is going to have a permit pretty soon. Oakland is operating. There's some discussion in Berkeley and discussion in Alameda. So it just really seemed like it made great sense to come and talk to you and sort of update you on what's happening with shared scooters these days. So I'm going to see if I can get this thing to go. So if you're not familiar with the shared scooter program, basically our mission really is to get people out of cars and to take those short and medium trips in other ways, specifically on a scooter. And the way that this is done is that we deploy scooters throughout the city, and folks can, they use their app and they can turn them on, they can ride to where they go, and they can leave them where they are. Improves, the idea about getting people out of cars, so we're talking about improving air quality, reducing congestion, and really trying to solve some of that last mile problem that we have. As far as, how you're going to get from the transit stop to where you're going, or, some of those short trips. And so scooters have been around for about 3 years now in cities all over the country and all over the world. They are in, locally in San Francisco, they're in San Jose, they're Oakland, and up in Sacramento as well. And we're learning a lot about scooters. There's some really interesting data that I think is important, especially as we are dealing with COVID. We continue to deal with COVID and some of the economic impacts of the pandemic. But one of the things that we've learned is approximately 6% of rides connect to a local business. And in fact, there was a recent study out of Emory University, and when I say recent, I mean the last couple of weeks, that concluded that about $921 in spending is created per scooter deployed over an average of 6 months. So this is based on Santa Monica, so close to 13.8 million across 370 food and beverage companies in that town. So, I think that when we're talking about maybe coming back from this and we're all starting to get our vaccines and emerging from our homes, it would just be so great to do whatever we can to support local business. And one way to do that is to facilitate ways for folks to get there. And one way to do that is through shared scooters. The other thing is that the folks that manage these scooters, in this case, what Bird does is we actually contract with local operators. And this would, in fact, be somebody who lived in Albany, who manages a fleet of scooters, who is then managed by us. Basically, we work with them. So they would have, whatever that fleet might be, 25, 50, maybe 100 scooters. They're in charge of bringing them out, taking them back in again, cleaning them, repairing them. We work with them to make sure that they know how to do everything. We give them very powerful suite of tools to understand where to best deploy them, how to move them should something come up, etc. And we call those folks fleet managers. And we actually also partner with existing businesses as well. So for example, in San Francisco, when the pandemic hit a year ago, that's crazy to say that, we were looking for a partner to help us with our operations in the city. And San Francisco has a thriving bike rental business, except that it wasn't thriving because nobody was visiting San Francisco, and that business was in danger of closing, actually. And we approached them and said, hey, listen, you've got people, you've got vehicles, you've got room. Why don't you work with us? And we partnered with them, and actually we partnered with two different ones. Blazing Saddles is one, and another one is Bay Area Bike Share. So they're now running their bike rental programs, but they're also helping us run our distribution of our scooters in that city. And we can do that kind of thing in other cities as well. So it's been really, it's really worked out well. And in fact, a fleet manager earns approximately $70,000 a year, average take-home earnings from partnering with Bird. So it's really quite a good opportunity for somebody that would like to do it. It is hard work, by the way, but it's a great opportunity. The other thing that's kind of different about scooters really is that they've evolved over 3 years. And so I did want to definitely talk a little bit about the scooters that you would be seeing on your streets. They are much improved. I put some examples of some of the things that they do. For example, this is fairly new, but autonomous emergency braking. We check our brakes all the time on these vehicles, but should a brake fail, there's actually sensors on them which go to a brain in the, we call it the brain in the scooter. And that then triggers a message to automatically brake the wheel itself. So it can actually slow and stop the vehicle, even if the handle brake isn't working. We have skid detection, which basically what it does is it tells us when somebody might be riding this thing. Either they don't know what they're doing or they are riding irresponsibly. And the idea here is that if it's going really fast and there's really hard braking and it's skidding, we can get that data and we can then reach out to that rider and just ask them, is there something going on? Do you need some help? Send them some more information about how to ride a scooter. We have something called beginner mode, which if you've never ridden a scooter before, you can choose to do this, which basically just makes it a little bit more gentle, starts a little slower. That's, doesn't go quite as fast. And what we learned is something around with scooter accidents, about 30% of all scooter accidents were from people who have ridden the scooter for the first time. So we created this beginner mode. And then the batteries themselves, and I know many of you may have heard horror stories about, scooters that get tossed, into lakes or into the bay and things like that. And the problem with that, besides the fact that you have to go and fish the thing out, is that the batteries could leak and they could cause some environmental damage. These things have IP68 waterproofing, which is the most advanced waterproofing. It's how they waterproof the electric car batteries, and they are submersible. And so they're not going to leak out and they're not going to damage the environment, so that we can retrieve the vehicle and get it out there without any further problem. And then just like there's the onboard diagnostics on these vehicles, it's like 200 plus fault codes. So this thing is as it's operating, is talking to the brain and talking to us thousands of times a minute, basically letting us know what's going on. So it's really quite an advanced vehicle. And then beyond that, the way the wheels are made, these wheels are pneumatic in that they have air in them, but they're also puncture proof because the way that they're built is they're actually sort of a honeycomb of rubber and open spaces so that you can get a very comfortable ride and still not have to deal with flats and that kind of thing. And that's great for the users and great for us as well. There are no screws on this vehicle. People can't come and unscrew something. They couldn't find them. They are all hidden or built without screws. It kind of goes on. I mean, even to where we place the bell is very ergonomic, so that it's very simple just to move your thumb and whack the bell if you need to let somebody know that you're coming. And then I'll just kind of keep going. And then our rider communications. So this is the other thing I think it's important to talk about, is that the actual interface that the people use with these scooters has also advanced quite a bit. There's a lot of messaging that goes on pre-ride, post-ride, and even, if you're not riding and maybe we're going to send you a message about something. But I put some examples here of a pre-ride checklist that we'll be talking to people about. Like there'll be a parking pre-ride checklist, keeping ADA access clear, parking away from transit stops, or no parking in crosswalks, things like that. And we even do a thing where basically when you park the scooter, you have to take a photograph of it so that you're parking it upright and properly, and you take a picture of that so that we can monitor it, make sure that the scooter is parked properly. We have a feature called a helmet selfie, that if you wanted to get a discount, you could take a picture of yourself wearing your helmet, and we'll give you a discount off your ride to encourage helmet use. Pop-up banners that come up. And then we do a lot of cool things with local partners as well. So for example, we might do a promotion where we would promote local businesses in the area. Maybe Gordo's would pop up or something like that. And I had to say Gordo's because I know Gordo's. I live in San Francisco, on 9th Avenue, and there's a Gordo's there. And then I go to Albany and there's a Gordo's there, and it's like the same people are working there, and I don't understand how that works. But they've been, I've been eating Gordo's burritos for like 30 years as I digress. But anyway, we can promote local business. That's where I was going with that. So, okay, thank you. I'll keep going with a lot of different. The other thing I do want to talk about this is that it makes it very customizable to the city. So every city has, priorities and has particular issues that are particular to them. And so, for example, maybe it might be, a little bit more messaging around students or something like that for Albany, or I don't know what it would be, but we could work with the city to create customized messages and customized trainings that apply specifically to this municipality. And the other thing about outreach and is that we do a lot as far as sort of celebrating and promoting with our scooters. So for example, some of the outreach we've done, we have a bird low income plan, which is actually really important, our community plan. And this plan is for those folks that can't afford to ride these scooters, and they can get 50% off of their rides. But we actually expand our community plan. So we also include 501c3 organizations that serve people who are low income or people who are disadvantaged, because we feel like those workers can take a break and could use the break, but also we really want to ensure that we widen the types of folks that use our vehicles. And if I work for the 501c3 that is working with some of the disadvantaged folks, then they'll say, hey, look, he's using it. She's using it. Maybe I can use it too. And we can get them signed up on the community plan. But we don't stop there. We also include essential workers. So if you're a waiter, or if you're working in the grocery store, you can apply for this program. So we sort of change it depending on what's going on. We're also giving free rides to first responders. So if you're a first responder, you can get 2 free rides up to 30 minutes every single day. every day for as long as this crisis continues. We're doing free rides for teachers in the month of April in San Francisco, and that's just to celebrate the fact that these teachers are going back into the classrooms after a year of teaching on Zoom, and you can just imagine the insanity. And they have to rearrange their rooms, they have to get all their stuff out, they have to space their desks, and you name it, it goes on and on. They are buried right now. And so we said, hey, let's give free rides to teachers. Let's do something to celebrate the fact that they're coming back to work. And again, this is customizable. That was for San Francisco. It's something that I feel strongly about. And so we did that, and we can work with the city on those kinds of programs. And yeah, well, that's it. I kind of ran through my whole thing there. So I'll stop the share there. And thank you so much for giving me the time to talk about Bird, and to, certainly if you all have some questions or some thoughts, I would love to hear them and answer them. If I can't answer them, I'll come back to you with answers and just kind of go from there.
Great, thank you. Let's start with commissioner questions. I'll start. Thanks for coming and sharing this information. We found before with shared vehicles that just having Albany as a territory is somewhat limiting. Will you have adjacent territories to Albany, or where do you picture people connecting to transit and going in and out of Albany with these?
Yes, thank you for that question. Just Albany would be a little bit restrictive, and we hope to work in the region. So we're really hoping to look at other cities in the region and to try to bring cities together to create a program where these scooters can be operated across lines. That said, this fleet manager program that I told you about, where we manage by bringing in somebody local, if the city of Albany wanted to have a scooter program and no other city around it, wanted one, we could still do it for two things. First of all, we can scale to any size number of scooters that would make sense for the city. Second of all, we can, and I didn't mention this, we can geofence, which means we can basically set up virtual barriers where the scooters can't pass. So we could set up barriers around Albany. So if somebody tried to ride into Berkeley or into El Cerrito, the scooter would shut down basically. And so it's very possible to do it. And if you wanted to do a pilot, even if there weren't other cities participating. But that said, my hope is that other cities will, and that we'll work with them on this to do that, so that folks can cross the line. And if they live in Albany, work in Berkeley, or vice versa, and they want to use a scooter, they could do that.
Okay. Other commissioner questions? Del Rosario.
Thanks, and I have a few. So first is on data. It looks like you're able to collect a lot of data from the scooters, whether it's their travel patterns or how they're using the scooter. Is that data going to be available to the cities to parse and analyze?
Yes, and I should have had a slide on that. What we do is we can create customizable dashboards for you. And again, we can, some cities want certain data that other cities don't care about, vice versa. But there is basic trip data that we can provide pretty easily, starts and stops, time of day, rides per vehicle, length of time they're sitting out there without being ridden, that kind of thing. App opens, which is a great one. Like, let's say somebody opens an app, how often do they actually get on the scooter? Because that's a really interesting indication of maybe there's not one around or something. And then also data that might help you with patterns as far as seeing where are people riding. And maybe that might be a way to help you determine where you might want to put a bike lane or a protected lane or something of that nature. But yes, so there's plenty of data available. It is customizable for what you want. And we can either provide it to you directly, or we could create a report for you. Or if you end up using a third-party aggregator, we'll work with that aggregator as well.
Great. You talked about geofencing, and then you also talked about this photo process of where you making sure you park scooters in the right location and they're upright, et cetera. Is that how you prevent scooters from being parked, say, in front of a crosswalk? Or is there a geofence ability to do that gives you an alert, say, on your app that says, you kind of stopped in a wrong location, you need to move, and we're not going to close out your trip until you do that?
Yeah, it's really more the latter. We don't have the technology yet to zero in on whether you're, say, at a corner in a crosswalk or whether you're next to, let's say, a fire hydrant or something like that where you wouldn't want it parked. What we try to do is, and by the way, I mean, you're touching on something that's really, really important in most cities, is the parking and the clutter. And so we take it really, really seriously. It's been an issue since the scooter sharing started. So we try to do it a lot through rider communication and incentivizing. So what some cities do is they'll actually create areas where they want the scooters to park. So maybe it's on every, section of a particular block for several blocks. We can create quote unquote hubs or nests where the rider is either incentivized to park there. In other words, hey, if you park in this nest, you get $1 off your ride. Or, I mean, it can be even more than that. It can be, you can't park anywhere but in this nest. So for example, in San Francisco, parking has been very difficult. And what we have done now is we put every bike rack in San Francisco in our app. So if you open up the app, you'll see all the bike racks on there. And then you'll see where our scooters are. When you ride a scooter, when you go to stop, it won't let you turn off the scooter unless you're within, like, I think it's 25 feet of a bike rack. And otherwise, it's going to say, it won't turn off, and then it'll beep at you, and you'll look at your handheld, your phone, and it'll say, hey, we want you to park at a bike rack. Walk it over to a bike rack, and then it'll turn off. Now, it's the geofencing isn't precise enough to say it's right next to the bike rack and good to go. But it's things like that, plus the messaging, that has really helped with that situation. So the other thing I should say is that often with cities, we'll establish something called an SLA, or a service level agreement, which is basically, we will agree that there is a certain amount of time that when there's a complaint about, say, a scooter in the public right of way, that it will be moved. And typically we move these things in under 2 hours. So we could probably create an agreement with the city that said, hey, there's a 2-hour SLA for having these things moved once they're reported. So all those together, they don't solve the issue, but they really mitigate it quite a bit.
Got it. And related to maybe a question for staff, I think it's my understanding that there wouldn't be any type of permission for rideshare or microtransit or scooter share to operate in Albany. I think it's just like a business license or somehow to register as a business. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I have, actually, I think I only have, I have 2 questions. I don't know, Chair McCroskey, if you want me to continue.
Sure,
or
keep going.
Okay. So safety, I believe that people under the age of 18 are not allowed to ride scooters, but I think it's probably a given that they do ride the scooters. And I don't know if there's anything that can be done for improving safety for when they do, or safety incentives that you guys put out there. The idea of wearing a helmet, that's a good one, but I don't know if you go further with distributing helmets or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I've seen definitely younger folks riding scooters.
Yeah, so it is an issue. First of all, there is some pretty robust ID checking that happens when you open up your account. And so what you do now, and this is actually, I don't know if other operators are doing it, but this is what we do, is that you first have to scan your license, and then you have to take a selfie. And that selfie has to match with the license for you to be able to move into the flow of renting your scooter. So we try to really make sure it's one scooter for one person, and that person should be 18 years old. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, of course. Young people do end up on scooters. We have been reaching out. One thing that we do is we reach out to high schools, and we actually have some printed information that we deliver to high schools that basically says what the rules are. You know, you're not supposed to ride if you're 18, and it also says if you ride, you wear a helmet, you know, and be safe. So we do try to do outreach. In times of COVID, the outreach has been virtual, but typically the outreach would be face-to-face, where we'd actually go to, you know, an assembly or to a parents group, and we would talk about this. And let's see, did I cover that? So the other thing I was going to talk about is that we do offer free helmet programs. And we can do this depending, again, it depends sort of on where we're at. Sometimes we'll do it through local bike shops, for example. So we'll say in the app, hey, if you need a helmet, you can go pick one up here. Or, you know, perhaps it's more appropriate, hey, we'll mail you one. Here, you can click this thing, and we'll send you, we'll send you a helmet. So we do those as well. And then once we get back into doing, on-site events, like if there's a street festival or something of that nature, and we have a booth, we often have helmets there that we give out. And then we also do live training at events like that, where we'll let people ride and we'll teach them and we'll talk about, how to ride them safely.
Thanks. And sorry, my last question is on pricing. Does it work the same as the competitors? And I can't recall if there's dynamic pricing or surge pricing, or if pricing would be the same in Albany as it is, say, in San Francisco.
Yeah, it may or may not be the same in Albany as in San Francisco. I don't determine that, but we don't do a surge pricing. We basically it's an unlock price, and then it's a price per minute. And I think it's pretty typical. I think right now it's about $1. It is almost always $1 to unlock. What that means is to turn the vehicle on is $1, and then it's a price per minute. And I believe right now we're at about 38 cents a minute is what it is. And if, for example, we signed up Berkeley or El Cerrito or other cities around there, the pricing would be the same. We may, for example, we shouldn't say we may. We do have pricing programs. So, for example, we have ride passes. So if somebody wanted to ride, all day or something like that, they can buy a ride pass, which would make things cheaper for them, or ride for a week. We also have arrangements. We can go to an employer and we can say, hey, if you want to, to encourage your riders not to drive, we can come up with a program for your riders that's cheaper for them to use the thing, say Monday through Friday, that kind of thing.
Great, thanks. That was all very informative.
Sure. All right, other commissioner questions? Commissioner Javandar.
Thanks. I think you already touched on a couple of the questions I was going to ask about checking for age and the helmet stuff. It sounds like your free helmet program isn't necessarily in all of your markets. Is that right?
No, it is in all of our markets. It's just how we manifest it. We do try to work with the municipality on what we think would work best in that particular market. And I think actually, so like, for example, in denser areas, it might be easier to have a place where you can just go and get it. But maybe in an area that's more spread out, mailing it to people might be better.
Right, because what I was thinking of was directing people to local bike shops or other helmet vendors.
Yeah.
Even if they had to buy their own, make it easy for them to find where to buy one would be good.
And we could feature those businesses in our app, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
Exactly. And another thing you had mentioned, that if they parked in the right place, they could get a discount. I don't know if you've considered discounts for taking a picture with your helmet on before your ride as another means of encouraging wearing of helmets. It'd be nice to see something like that as well.
We do have that. We call that the helmet selfie feature, and it's
Okay.
turned on now in San Francisco. It is something that we do on a city by city basis. So if a city asks for it, or if we think that it makes sense, around the university, I think it's a no-brainer to do that. Is to give a nice discount for people to wear their helmet and to take a picture of themselves doing it, and I think it would help encourage them to do so.
Great, thank you.
Other commissioner questions? Yes, Commissioner Graham.
I think most of my questions have been asked, but what if a rider, like you have proof that a rider is sort of a repeat offender against this pledge that they outlined? Do you take the app away from them, or what is the consequence?
Well, the ultimate consequence is we can ban them from the platform. Yeah, but that's not what we typically do. What we have in general, and I say again in general because we will do this a little different in different cities, is a 3-step process. So somebody does something, it's not right. We're going to reach out to them. We're going to warn them. And we're going to say, hey, listen, this is how you need to do it. We might make them go through the training flow again, something like that. If it happens again, then we could warn them. We could fine them. Now, that's very much around what the city would want. Okay. So in San Francisco, they like us to fine people. So we fine people. And then maybe the third time is that we would be banned from the platform. That's pretty darn rare, to be honest with you. I will say that the vast majority of mistakes that are made on scooters, whether it's parking or riding, is done in the first or second ride. And people start to get the hang of it after that, and there's far less, they at least engage far less in that, in behavior that's wrong. So it is sort of, it does seem like it's kind of a learning curve. Just remembering to do everything right the first time. Sometimes they don't.
And then one other question, your local operators, they're contract employees?
The local operator is they're an entrepreneur. They're running their own business. So we bring them in and we set them up for their business. The way they make their money is through rides. So they're basically earning a portion of the ride revenue. And so what we're doing is we're providing them with the scooters, we're providing with parts, we're providing them with training and with the technological platform to do the work. And then they use that to basically run the operations. I will just point out really quickly that although they're running the operation, Bird stays firmly responsible for the operation. So as far as the city is concerned, if there's an issue at all in any way about how the operation is going, then you reach out to Bird. Bird holds the permit. Bird's responsible. Bird has the insurance. Bird does all that. So that you only have one funnel and you know who to work with and you know that we are accountable. But then we work with the local entrepreneur to actually do the operations. And actually, it's really cool. There's one group in South San Francisco that we're talking to right now, and they're a transit organization. And they would like to be, they'd like to look at, I should say, being a fleet manager for us. So that's a nonprofit that wants to do a fleet manager operation. Like I said, we have the businesses like Blazing Saddles that were doing it. And then we have individuals who are impacted. They lost their jobs or whatever or they just are, entrepreneurs, and they live in the community and they want to start their own business. And they've been highly successful. By the way, I have a lot of great information on that I can send. I can send it to Justin. And if you want to learn more about it, it's like a 3-page FAQ about it, because I know it's important. I know labor is important. Understanding how these scooters are managed is important for the cities.
Commissioner Graham, were those your questions? You're done? Okay. Commissioner Fong, do you have any questions? No. Okay. Well, we've all had a chance then, and let's turn it over to the public. Members of the public who are interested in commenting or asking questions, please use the raise your hand function, and we will give you a turn to speak.
Jeremiah, you may address the commission.
Thank you. I entered the presentation a little late, but I just have a few questions, maybe was already answered, regarding helmets, whether or not they're provided. What color is a scooter? Is it black? Are there any lights on it for safety? Do the wheels light up at nighttime? Are there any lights underneath the body for the scooters? You know, lights at nighttime. Also, I don't know if safety vests are required, but safety vests would be good. I don't know. You know, and the charging thing, I'm not sure if this was something to where local people could gather these scooters and charge them and make some sort of commission charging them and then putting them back out on Solano, some key locations underneath the BART tracks or something by the schools. You know, maybe incorporate scooters at each school, you know, encourage safe routes to school, going green, making it easy for the kids. There's a lot of students in Albany. I see mostly kids, you know, teens to adults riding these scooters. Is there a setting to where you could turn down the power on the scooter to where it's not so powerful when you twist the throttle? Is there a snail or a turtle setting, you know, and then, you know, a rabbit, a real fast setting on these things? I think this is great. I think this is wonderful. I really like it. I'm all for it for sure. You know, if you're in Albany, I hope you stay a long time. You know, I know those Lime bikes were in and out, but they weren't really electric. They were just bicycles, which is great. But anything Bird could offer, ride share, electric scooters, electric bicycles, you know, San Pablo. I'm just not sure about what the municipal code is on riding on sidewalks or the streets. I don't know. Are you supposed to ride in the street? Is it legal? Is it like a bicycle and you're in the bike lane? Obviously, you need to wear a helmet if you're under 18 or something. But I think this is wonderful. I mean, I love electric scooters. I'm all for it. I just want it to be safe for the public. I know when those Lime bikes were around Albany, there were a lot of complaints that the Lime bikes were parked in the middle of the sidewalk. They'd fall on the ground. The wind would blow them over. They're becoming a public situation, a safety hazard instead of a thing. So hopefully it's organized and it works out. You know, good luck.
Thank you, Jeremiah. If I may, a lot of your earlier questions were addressed in the presentation. I believe the presentation is in the agenda and supporting documents. So I'm going to direct you back there for those. And then after the end of public comment, I'll take a couple of your later questions and pose those to the company representative, if that's all right. Are there any other public comments?
I'm not seeing any, Chair McCroskey.
All right. So to Jeremiah's questions, first of all, Jeremiah, I just want to let you know that the age requirement is 18 on these scooters. So that's going to change the color of some of your questions. But I'm going to focus basically on the last two you had. The last of which was helmet age. And in Albany, until you're 16, you're required to wear a helmet. And then the other question was around riding on sidewalks versus streets. So let's chat a little bit about that.
Yeah, I can address that. I mean, it's against the law to ride on the sidewalk in most cities, right? Most cities don't want these scooters on the sidewalk. We want them in the bike lane is ideally, right? And It's actually, I mean, he's touching on something that again is often a concern of many cities, and we do an awful lot of work around sidewalks, riding. You know, very similar to that question I had earlier about geofencing. The technology is not quite there to be for a scooter to be able to tell for sure whether it's on a sidewalk or whether it's on a street. We do have the technology to know at about 80%. And what we can do is we actually can analyze the data that we get, and then we can reach out to the rider after the fact and say, hey, listen, it looks like you've been riding on the sidewalk. Did you know that that's illegal? You should be riding on the street. And by the way, there's some bike lanes here. So we can do that. And the reason I say 80 or 90% is that safety is really important here. And if somebody got a bad reading, because really what you would want to do is if the scooter's on the sidewalk, it should slow or stop, right? But if for some reason the thing thinks it's on a sidewalk and it's not, and if it's in a crosswalk or, you know, something of that nature, and it slows and stops suddenly, you know, where it shouldn't, that's why we have to be super, super careful about it. I do think that the technology is going to get there. I do think at some point we're going to be able to detect that a scooter is on a sidewalk with certainty and then slow it down, but it's not there yet. And I don't think it'll be there, you know, this year, but I think it's coming. Again, so what you have to do is we have to really get into communication, and we have to get into accountability. So communication meaning, you know, really making sure that people know not to ride on sidewalks. And if they do, and if they're spotted or, you know, discovered, is to really let them know that they can't do that. And if they continue to do it, is to bar them from the platform.
Great. Thank you for that explanation. Other commissioner comments, feedback to both staff and the company? Commissioner Del Rosario.
I do hope, for comment, I do hope that staff does set up a dashboard and we'll have all sorts of metrics in there if this is indeed coming to Albany. I think Jeremiah raised a good point about the line bikes where, you know, they were here and, you know, we had some concerns about them. And I think a lot of our concerns didn't come to fruition, and it was a fairly organized program, despite, you know, not much intervention from the city. But they disappeared, just kind of, and we weren't quite sure why they disappeared. And, you know, I guess the market kind of dwindled out, or not sure what the reason is. But we don't have those bikes here anymore. And I guess there's also the regional bike share program. But I think just monitoring the program and the program's use and success will kind of allow us to keep tabs on it, so that we don't have the rug pulled out from under us in the future. And just other performance metrics on safety and, you know, use and where they're going is always really useful stuff. So I hope staff does take advantage of that offer.
Who's next? Well, I'll say then that I certainly welcome added mobility, and you know, I too agree that the line bike experiment showed that the city didn't have to put in a lot of intervention. There was some reporting of problems, but I think that all worked itself out pretty well. The place where the line bike experiment really ran into problems was that you could not ride to BART. And that'll be true as well if you're just in Albany. And my biggest concern is if the scooters are limited to Albany, because that doesn't get you to BART. It really limits the usefulness. And in fact, you know, most people don't have a really clear idea where the boundaries of Albany are. I would say. It's not something that people just automatically recognize, and it can be a little confusing. And depending on how your algorithm works, I mean, you know, one side of Solano in the east is in Albany, and one side is not. So you'll have to deal with that. And it's unclear where the city limits are, and so I would urge you to wait until you have adjoining community partners.
Mhm.
The echoing Commissioner Del Rosario's comments, I mean, it wasn't just that the Lime bikes disappeared. They did eventually disappear. They also waxed and waned quite a bit. And there was frustration around not being able to get BART. So I think coming on strong with clear communication about and ability to connect would be good. If you're talking about adults, I mean, yeah, we're not talking about trips between schools. One of the highest uses from my standpoint would be to get to BART, to get to and from BART.
Mhm.
And that's in Berkeley or El Cerrito. And, we have people who use either BART station, depending on what's closer.
Well, I appreciate that. It makes a lot of sense. It definitely makes a lot of sense. And I'll just reiterate, we're talking to many of the cities in the area, and we hope to do just that, is to have sort of a metro area rather than one city here and one city there. So thank you for that.
Commissioner Jean-Mabel.
Just to follow up on that point, I wanted to comment that while it's ultimately up to the city councils in other cities, we are working in Berkeley on a proposal, hopefully to get to council this summer, that would establish a permitting program for shared electric scooters or bikes. So that would open the door to a broader operating area that would certainly serve Albany well, be able to ride into Berkeley, at least to the North Berkeley BART station. I'm not as familiar with what El Cerrito is doing, but certainly Berkeley, Emeryville, Oakland, we're trying to be largely on the same page in terms of how those programs can operate.
Great. Yeah, we haven't even talked about UC Village and their proximity to the Gilman area, right across the Berkeley border.
Yeah, we've talked to UC Berkeley as well, and they're very interested. I think UC Berkeley is mostly interested in understanding what Berkeley is going to do. And then once they know what Berkeley is going to do, then they're going to fall in with that.
Are there other commissioner comments? So no from Graham, not seeing anything from Fong. Great. All right. Well, thank you again for coming and talking with us and presenting and explaining. And we hope you have a good, strong rollout and long-term presence.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you giving me all this time. It's great. Thank you.
Come back.
Okay, I will. Look out.
Great. Okay, so that's item 5.3. I'm sorry, that was item 5.2. We're going to move on to item 5.3, the draft commission work plan.
Thank you, Chair McCroskey. Pull up presentation. This item is for the drafting of a new work plan for the Transportation Commission. It's brief background. It's a 2-year cycle for our work planning presented to the City Council for approval. And we look for to the council approved work plans to guide advisory body actions and discussions for the 2-year period. Primary considerations are the council strategic plan, city programs and policies, and our workload and prioritization we establish in the work plan. The city council strategic plan, the existing strategic plan has a item on foster healthy and sustainable urban village, and the key objective within that is promoting active transportation and safety with relevance for the commission. The draft plan that you were provided is organized similarly to last cycle's work plan around these items within the strategic plan. So it's organized to match that. They include the implementing and updating active transport plan and CIP projects, implementing complete streets plans on San Pablo and Solano, and developing timeline and funding plans to achieve street safety related infrastructure goals. And it calls out street paving, lighting, and safety features at intersections and other crossings. Other programs and policies identified in the draft plan include our ongoing management of on-street curb designations, our role for safety for reviewing collision and safety data to identify priorities and any hotspots, monitoring emerging mobility issues or new mobility, and ongoing work to modernize the municipal code. So those items are also reflected in the draft work plan you were provided. And again, you're encouraged to focus on a reasonable number of work plan items to accomplish in a given year on the associated workload with those items. And it is intended to identify priorities and not just a long list. And with that, I wasn't going to run through line by line of the work plan, but I can pull it up if you want to talk more specifically about the items with it up on the screen. But with that, I'll hand it over to Chair McCroskey.
We might get there. Yeah. So just to be clear, this is the start of the process, and we'll start throwing out some ideas and talk about previous work plan. So let's start off with any questions about the process or about the information that we just heard, and then we'll go for a little public comment, and then we'll bring it back to the commission and see if we can't talk about how we want to move forward. So is there any part of the process that's not clear? Commissioner Javadal?
Just a question, not as much about the process, but one of the elements, the ATP plan, is that what we are using to satisfy Alameda County Transportation Commission's requirement to have an updated bike and pedestrian plan every 5 years?
That is correct.
So it is necessary in order for us to continue receiving funding from them. Thank you.
Any other questions, clarifications? Three of us have been through this process before. We're fairly familiar with it, and we'll take plenty of time to bring the rest of you along. Shouldn't be very difficult. So let's get any public comment that we might have, and then we'll come back to the commission for some opinions and comments. So if you're a member of the public who wishes to make a comment at this time, please use the raise your hand function.
Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing anyone.
Okay. Fair enough. And this process will be ongoing, so people will have a chance to comment at future meetings. Not a problem. So I guess I'd like to start with a general comment. I think we came up with an exceedingly specific, long list last time. And I, for one, found the list a little bit cumbersome to refer to and use. I'm interested in maybe doing a little more generalization. I also feel that we've reached the end of our ATP cycle, and we've implemented a lot of those projects. There still are projects to keep implementing, both in the ATP and outside, but that one of our highest priorities is to revitalize the ATP, and there are projects now waiting on that revision of the ATP. So it seems like a pretty strong priority, and it's actually called out, I think, in the city council plan, or at least was in the last plan. So I think that can serve as a strong focus. So you all read the last list, right? And you remember it all. Does anybody have any comments on the draft, which is essentially fairly similar to our last list? Please.
Sorry, there's a lot of children chatter behind me.
It's okay.
So I noticed that the San Pablo bus stop was on last year's. I think that needs to continue to this year because it's not done yet. So there's still probably some effort for the commission to monitor that to completion. I also thought the work plan was light on transit. And I think, the next question is, well, what do we look at transit? I believe Devora from staff is the program. So I think that's going to come to the commission probably in the next year, I would guess, or next
I'm sorry,
9
Robert.
months.
You were breaking up a little bit for me. Could you say
sorry.
that last sentence again?
Yeah, let me. So I was thinking about more transit related work scope items, and one of them is and then the next question is, well, what would those be? And I know that Devora from staff is participating on the bus shelter program, and I think there will be decisions potentially for the commission and the council to make related to that. So that could be on the list. And then also for AC Transit and BART, but probably more so AC Transit, there is some level of recovery that's going to happen over the next couple of years that will seek input from the local jurisdictions. I know there's a lot of discussion about service to Pier Street and how that's lacking right now. And so I think some input from the city and the commission would be useful for that. I hope we can, right behind the ATP, I hope we can prioritize the streetlight evaluation, because I think that's been on a number of work plans and we just haven't gotten around to it. And that seems like one that we always get comments on and one that the commission is interested in. And then finally, to the chair's point about being more general, I assume there will be something, I may not even know what it is yet, but something related to COVID recovery. And I'm not sure quite what that is. I may have an idea when we talk about future agenda planning items, but I assume there's going to be something related to that and transportation. So those are my inputs.
Thank you.
Can I ask a confirmation? So the items that were on the plan for the last 2 years that didn't get addressed got rolled over into this plan?
I believe so.
That's a question, I guess.
Yeah.
That was my intention for the most part. I can look through and
No. I'm not. It's not a trick question.
if there, I can make sure to highlight if there's something that didn't fall into that category, but that was my intention. Things that were either delivered or a commission had acted and made their recommendation. I attempted to clean off the work plan.
Yeah, for example, we could simply have an item that says, follow up on initiated projects that could cover things like the bus stop and keep us from having to call out everything that is just being completed. Commissioner Fong.
Yeah, I just wanted to second what Commissioner Del Rosario mentioned, especially around the bus service to the Pier Street was something that I've heard a lot of interest around, and maybe even how we can support some also local Solano Avenue businesses with a bus service. Another potential idea, I think I might have mentioned this before, is like how we can support the San Pablo plan. I think a lot of stuff already on here seems to do that, but since that is on the agenda for City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission, that's something I'd like to call out.
How about something related to streamlining active transportation access to the bulb, or improving active transportation access to the bulb? I think this would be the place to really set that up. And then we can figure out what form that takes.
Yeah, I'd be in support of that.
Yes, please, go ahead.
And the prioritization, if this is in, where does the prioritization come from? Just it's a holdover from the last year's prioritization. That's a process that we would go through.
Yeah, so we ended up structuring it around strategic plan items in the last one, which I carried over. So the prioritization is a little less clear. It's prioritized by the number order within each council work plan item is how it's currently set up. So the idea is that within each of those items, there's higher priorities are towards number one, but it's a little clunky.
I guess one thought that I have is if we have to do an update of the active transportation plan, it would be to prioritize that sooner than later, because it may influence some of the other projects that are on the list, especially some of those that are, actual specific sort of infrastructure projects.
Chairman Kresge, if I may, with respect to the prioritization, the commission can feel free to rearrange that. This ultimately does go to the city council, and they may put it back in a different order again. But this is, at this stage at least, is your work plan and your suggestion for prioritization. So if you see something that you want to move around, please let us know, and we can do that.
Yeah, along with what Justin said, the order overall is a general indication of priority, or it was informing our last work plan, and we can certainly debate that and reorganize it as we see fit, as we submit it. I'd certainly be interested in finding ways to slow streets in general, and I don't know how to quite put that, but taking advantage of whatever possibilities wherever we can to bring traffic speeds down to human speed.
I like that idea. And definitely, I think we have opportunity with, everything with the pandemic to make that a reality. I'd be very interested in that.
How would you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, and of course we know that, Oakland and Berkeley and a lot of other municipalities around us as well have had these slow streets programs. So, but a lot of them are temporary. How can we make those, more permanent? There are, of course, other ideas. Like I think, there's other municipalities that have lower speed limits that they can just set in certain zones that we could consider. Yeah, those are all, I'm all very supportive of ways that we can do that. Of course, combining that with bike lanes and all that, of course, is a great idea too, but that's, I think we can do them separately if necessary.
we're sort of winding down. So I guess the next step, Justin, would be for you to take some of the comments and try and add them to the draft, and then maybe we can all make a commitment prior to the next commission meeting to take, print ourselves out a copy and start marking it up and really think seriously about how you would prioritize it and what you would propose individually, and then we can see how those compare and hash it through.
Okay.
And if we come to loggerheads, or if it proves too cumbersome in the commission meeting, we might have a subcommittee work over the next month to try and draft it and come up with a proposal. It can be a little cumbersome in this format to hash things through. So let's see how it goes. Yes, please.
Well, I guess so. Given that you had a work plan that maybe was a big bite last time, I mean, is the intent of the work plan to be work that can actually be achieved in 2 years, or is it? I mean, or is it sort of just our prioritized list of things to do as we can? You know what I'm saying? Because I think that if this is largely a holdover from last year, because a lot of those things didn't get accomplished, then as we're reviewing them, maybe we would want to pick out the top 4 or 5 things that we think are the most important and could be achievable within a year or within 2 years, and or that could be something that we could have insight on from the staff in terms of what you think we can actually get done within 2 years. So that's sort of a question and a thought.
Yeah, it's a reasonable question. To some extent it is aspirational, but it's also an attempt to make sure that we can continue to do the sorts of things that we generally do that come up over time in the course of our meetings.
I guess one question I could pose related to that, since Ken did mention Commissioner McCroskey did mention the long list, and we do have basically a lot of these projects that are CIP projects that have sort of a prioritization and schedule associated with the CIP that I think in the past we wanted to keep them on here to reflect their commission priorities, but we could also rely on that document and try to not just list CIP projects if the commission was comfortable with that, and focus on some other elements that you're identifying here.
It's hard to make the distinction because most of the large stuff that we're excited about are CIP projects, but maybe there's a better way to call those out, or section them off and then talk about things that are sort of outside of that realm. Commissioner Del Rosario, did you have something to add?
Yeah, it might help for this group as we filter through the list. That the last process, I think it might have been the Transportation Commission's work plan that was approved by the council last, and it had to go through multiple iterations through the council. And so their initial comment was, and before we put this together, it was not tied to the strategic plan, so it was just a list. And the council thought, well, this seems pretty ambitious, and is it really aligned with the goals of the city or the goals of the council? And so we revised it this way. So I think there is some watchful eye on making sure that we're not overly ambitious, and that what we put on the work plan does align with what the city wants to do, and the council wants to do. So with that said, I think prioritization is important, and also what Chair McCroskey said about being maybe more general about subjects as opposed to being so specific. I think we went into such a deep level of specificity for the go around last time that it really raised a lot of eyebrows for the council, and we end up having additional work sessions to work through that. So I think that's hopefully gives us a little bit of context for developing this this work plan.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, I think the punchline from that process was, oh yeah, all these things are CIP projects. There is a lot going on. Oh. So I think we were able to support our assertion that there was a lot to do. But that doesn't mean we have to do it the same way. Yes, Commissioner Graham.
Well, I mean, but I guess what I don't understand is how funding is referenced in this list, because some of the things that are like advise or do work that's on an annual basis that is just staff time or our time is one thing. But if we have things that are prioritized on a list that are capital projects that we don't have the money for, then the prioritization of it doesn't really matter, or it skips in prioritization if we can get a local grant or a grant or something to fund it. And so I think that there's, to me, sort of like it again is between the operations and capital of like the things that we should be advancing. I don't know, because I guess my point is, I don't know how much this costs, right? And I imagine it's a lot and it costs a lot of money, and it would be more helpful to have something that I think that we can achieve within our time, and also within like, do we want to spend the money to develop the designs for Pierce Street Path Segment 2 if we don't have the money to implement it? So I guess maybe I should already know the answer to that, but I don't. And so I guess some education on that in terms of what's feasible within our budget would be helpful.
If I may, Chair McCroskey, I think Commissioner Graham is making a really good point, and there are actually kind of two different parts to the constraints that we face. One constraint is the financial one, just how much money we have in order to hire planners or consultants to do the work that we bring to the commission. And the second part of it that's is the capacity of our public works department to execute the projects. And your example of Pierce Street Park is a perfect one where we could probably plan it and design it in a year or two, and they may be quite a few years out, both due to financial restrictions and just their capacity to deliver. They only have so many project managers, and they have a certain number of projects that are due to various mandates, and it just gets pushed out a few years. And then when we do the planning and design now, and you execute a project 5 years from now, there's a stale that design can go stale. So I just think that I just want to reiterate that that's a really good observation. With respect to the financial, the near-term expenditures, as the commission is working on this in the next few months, we also at the staff level are working to develop our budget, our operating budget for the next 2 years. So, we'll kind of use this internally as we think about, okay, what kind of consultant services might we need in the next 2 years, and what might that cost? This would be a reference that we would use. And, ultimately when our operating budget goes to city council, we want to be able to say there are things in that operating budget proposal that align with the work plans of various commissions and committees. I don't know how much money we'll have available to you right now. I won't know that, and even internally for another couple of months. But we're doing okay, but we're not. Money's not super great right now in municipalities, but it's better than I think a lot of us feared it would be. So we'll be able to get some things done in the next couple of years, we think. Thank you.
I think Commissioner Fong had his hand up earlier.
Yeah, just a question about the capital improvement project. So generally, those would require that to come to the commission. Is that right for us to review? And, I'm just kind of, you mentioned taking them on or off. I'm just like, wasn't quite sure exactly how involved we would be with each of those projects.
I would say for anything that's transportation related or public right of way related, this commission almost always sees them to some degree or another. Certainly the big ones.
Okay, thanks. So I'm just trying to think through, so this prioritization is kind of what we're looking at, but potentially also how fast that project could be prioritized within the city, even kind of, it seems like a little bit of both from what I
Right, or if there's a granting opportunity, which projects do we want to push first or pursue most? And it's further grade because sometimes you have to have projects planned to a certain extent before you even start to grant. What level are we looking to start, and how far out does that mean that the project is in general? And I think that answers one of the questions about, is it aspirational versus is it practical for the next 2 years? Lighting is something that we've been looking at for a while. It's in process. Staff is working on it. It's not something that the commission itself can do anything about at the moment, but it will come back to us, and we want to keep it moving. So even though we didn't necessarily think we would accomplish it in 2 years, we wanted to make sure it was prioritized. And the city council also wanted to prioritize that. So I guess that leads me to the comment that this process is important, but it's also not the end all. And city council can also, bring up new projects along the way. They're unlikely to do that, but it has happened in the past. Like the North Albany Calming Project was a sort of a mid-season ad, if I remember correctly. But it's good for us to really think about, what we want to do and what we would like to tell the city council that we'd like to do. So I encourage you to think broadly, at least initially, and then we'll see what we can nail down together. Commissioner Javelle, sorry.
No problem. And you touched on part of what I wanted to mention, which is the idea of having projects ready for grant applications. And yes, we need some of those, but we don't need lots and lots of them. So if staff feels like we've got enough to keep applying for grants as they come up, then maybe we don't have to spend time developing concept plans for grant applications until we essentially burn through some of the ones that we've got and succeed in getting those grants. Otherwise, we run the risk of some of them becoming stale before we get to a point where they're fundable. So if staff feels like we're in good shape there, maybe we slow down new concept development and focus on enhancing the fundability of the stuff we've already got and on delivering the grants that are coming in, and just recognizing that things will pop up that council wants us to deal with that no one had anticipated. Private development projects that raise issues that we need to comment on, or issues like the school driveway that we talked about last time. Those are always going to happen, and that's to me just a given. So I'm comfortable with taking what we have and mostly continuing it. If urgent things come up, yes, we add those to our work plan, but I don't feel any great urgency to expand our work plan since it feels like we have enough to carry us over. A lot of stuff is multi-year on here, or it's programmatic. So those are the thoughts I've got as you go through to come back with a more final recommendation for us. But I'm comfortable with not having too many capital projects on there, as long as we've got some at each stage of the pipeline, stuff that's being built, stuff that's getting funded, stuff that is ready to apply for funding. If we've got something at every stage, I think we're in pretty good shape without becoming overly ambitious.
That's really interesting. So you're talking about more of a pipeline view of what's going on, and maybe that's maybe that's an ask we can make of staff to have maybe a more graphic representation of what our current project pipeline is and where you see us needing to put effort in the next couple of years. You know, things like the lighting project that are in process. Because we don't operate with a budget ourselves, you know, we kind of take the guideline from city council guidelines and their emphasis and what is possible and where we can get grants and keep things moving. But our major limitation besides money is staff effort and time. So would it be possible to have some kind of graphic representation of sort of a snapshot in time of what we're working on now, what we expect with the current draft of the work plan and the CIP, and how that plays out over the next couple of years plus?
Or I can kind of suggest, based off of what Commissioner Drummond was saying, I mean, maybe all the items that are on there now, like some sort of status, you know, like what stage that they're in. I don't know if that's doable. That way we can see this is the early stage right now, or idea stage, this is the late stage. I don't know, that's what he was trying to get at, but I don't know.
But that would be another way to address that same question, and that could be valuable as well. And thank you, because that's one of those questions that, you know, the other three of us who have been on it for a while have it sort of in our heads, and we kind of forget about that. And we want to make sure that that's visible and you have understanding of that.
In answer to your question, whether or not we can bring you a pipeline illustration, I'm sure. I think that would be pretty straightforward for us to do, and I think it also illustrating Commissioner Fong's point. I think we can have something for you next month.
Great.
That'd be helpful for me, at least.
It would help me as well. It's hard to keep it all in my head. All right. Any last comments?
Great. Mr. Chair, if I may, I do notice that we have a member of the public with his hands up.
Well, since I'm inclined to give that person some time, since we didn't get any public comment earlier, and we've been talking about a lot of things. So let's go ahead.
Jeremiah, you may go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much. You know, I really like what everybody was referring to so far as driving slower in the streets, some sort of reduced speed on the streets. And that is wonderful news for pedestrians. I just want to, you know, re-get that same excitement feeling I got when the Pedestrian Safety Act came out. You know, to tell you the truth, I thought I was the only person that was so excited that the Pedestrian Safety Act came out. This was maybe 8-10 years ago, I want to say. And I've been really big on pedestrian safety for many years. But, you know, that's what's really important, you know, because cars will hurt a person walking. So the Pedestrian Safety Act is wonderful, and reducing speed in the streets. The blocks are only so long. And, you know, I notice whenever there's a speed bump in the middle of the street, I tend to slow down. And I think speed bumps are great. You know, speed bumps really make a physical, it's not a sign. You know, people could just see a sign and ignore it and still drive the same speed. But if there's a speed bump, you physically will probably slow down because you don't want to damage your vehicle. You go slower over speed bump. So I'm all for putting speed bumps, you know, on every block in Albany, because we have so many families and so many kids and so many people unloading groceries and walking across the street to the neighbor's house, or, you know, playing catch in the middle of the street. We got all these cars driving by, but people are trying to live in front of their house. And hey, you know, I don't want a speed bump in front of my house. To tell you the truth, I'll volunteer, put a speed bump in front of my property. You know, I got the slowest traffic on the block. You know, I got the safest house on the block. You know, I don't know. There's obviously pros and cons. You know, it takes 2 seconds for the ambulance to get there longer, right, with the speed bump. So you have to consider the fire department. It's going to take 2 extra seconds to get there because of speed bump with the ambulance. So I understand those things. There are some concerns. But, you know, whatever we could do to slow cars in the streets, more signs. I mean, I'm glad we have signs around the schools now, at least. You know, school zones and all the money to repaint crosswalks. You know, signs are great, but speed bumps is really where you're going to make an impact, a number impact, a physical impact on reducing these streets in Albany. And every time you fix a street and you make it real smooth, there's no more potholes. Well, cars are going to drive faster too. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. With that, I think I'm going to close out the item, and I will just charge the commissioners to review the materials for next time and pick your favorite projects and be willing to defend them, and we'll have a discussion. So let's see. That moves us along to item number 6, announcements. Staff?
I had one announcement update from Public Works on the schedule for the Washington Avenue pavement rehabilitation project. Originally, East Bay Mud water pipeline replacement conflicted with the project extent, and the Cornell to Masonic section was pushed to a second phase to come after East Bay Mud completed that work. East Bay Mud, you may have noticed, has accelerated that work and it's now underway. So staff has been working with East Bay Mud and the city contractor to coordinate the schedules of the two projects, and the city has adjusted its approach now that the pipeline replacement is taking place sooner. So the Cornell to Masonic stretch is now going to get paved low and temporary striping be put down as part of the first phase. And then when East Bay Mud completes the pipeline work after the paving, the city is preparing a bid package to come right after and do the second phase. So we're anticipating that to happen in the fall. And so while it's impacted the current paving work and slowed things down for a bit, we expect the whole project to be completed much sooner. And there's a lot of details on this and actually on our other active projects now on the construction alerts page under Departments, Public Works, Construction Alerts. So more details are available there.
Great.
That's my announcement.
I have an announcement that this year's Bike to Work Day is on. The developing, appropriate distanced and safe celebrations, but plan for a celebration in May. More details later. Any other announcements from the commission?
I think that Coachella is this weekend.
Right, it's a good opportunity to ride your bike or walk around Albany. And you can find out more about Albany Coachella on Facebook. Good point. Future agenda items. Commissioner Del Rosario?
I saw an article in the Chronicle probably a week ago, and it was with regards to making the temporary parklet program, giving businesses the opportunity to make those permanent, and completely acknowledging that it's an effort for staff to investigate. But I thought the first step maybe would be for possibly partnering with the chamber to see if there's interest in businesses to want to make their parklets permanent. the other thing is that I think this isn't necessarily a transportation commission or a transportation item as much as it is a Parks and Rec item. I think that's where we've put parklets under. So I put that question out there, and then if it is something that is in the purview of transportation, then maybe it's something we can bring up in the future.
And I like to second that too. I think it's a great idea, and I love the parklets. So if we can do anything to support that, that's great. Yeah, I've raised $5,000 or something just for these parklets, so would love to keep them in the city.
Staff, do you have other future agenda items?
And I would expect the Marin paving project initial designs to come next month to the commission. You should expect to see that.
Great. All right, our next meeting is Thursday, April 22nd at 7 p.m. Thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks.